Chapter 26. Lisa sat nervously at the mirror in her dressing room at Wingmore Hall and tried to sit still as her sister applied brown stripes above her eyelashes. "Ooh, perfect. You look just like Rita Hayworth," said Rosie, putting on the last dab. Rosie then checked her own makeup in the mirror. Life and color had returned to her older sister's face. She looked as sophisticated as Lisa remembers. But it was Lisa who shimmered in her red gown as she stood up and straightened the dark seams of her silk stockings and tried to calm her wildly beating heart. Sonia ran into the dressing room from the stage where she had been peeking out from the wings at the gathering crowd. "It's almost full," she cried excitedly. "Don't go out there, they'll see you." "No, they won't." "Yes, they will," Lisa insisted. "Relax, the two of you. You're making me nervous," said Rosie. The hall was filling up quickly. Rosie had invited every person she met, people on the streets, the butcher on the corner. And of course, the students and faculty at Royal Academy would also be there. She had also insisted that Lisa invite the knight's French soldier, whose address she had come across in Lisa's night table. Lisa knew he would never come. She'd met him almost a year ago, but it didn't hurt to dream. Miss Cohen had organized an early dinner for everyone at the hostel so that they could get into the center of London at 7 o'clock sharp. Lisa's mind raced as she thought about how much had changed since her childhood fantasies of playing concerts for Viennese royalty. Instead of those adolescent dreams, she tried to focus on this audience filled with the good people of England. Her sisters wished her well one last time, and she was left alone. The hush was falling, the curtain was rising. Lisa walked elegantly onto the stage, and was greeted by enthusiastic applause as she sat at the 9-foot grand. With a subtle adjustment of her posture, she brought a hush over the audience. Once all was silent, Lisa waited a few breaths until the air of expectation was almost unbearable, then took a deep breath and went inside herself. When she felt the audience disappear, she lifted her hands in a graceful arch and began. She started with Beethoven's Pataké and had the courage to start quietly, as her mother had often counseled. She began with her story on the pianissimo that recalled the quiet despair of the agonizing separation from her family these past 6 years. The music deepened into thunderous chords, retelling the years spent defiantly warding off the Nazi attacks. Lisa searched within herself and found the colors and shadings to express the depths of her longings and the heights of her triumphs. As the intensity began to build, she sent her prayer across the footlights into the hearts of the people who had gathered together. The beauty of the music entered their souls, from the refugee to the barrister, to the garment worker, to the RAF pilot, from the resistance hero to the dock worker, and helped to guide them through the deepest, inexpressible emotions. Miss Cohen's eyes were shining as she allowed herself to remember and mourn her husband and sister, surely lost. Hans listened with a joy that surpassed any moment he had spent with Lisa in the cellar, the music bringing warmth to his darkness. In the simple, dignified melody of Chopin Nocturne in C-sharp minor, Miss Cantfield faced the loss of her son, John. Hearing the music, the heroism of his service as medic. In Miss Canfield's mind, Lisa imbued the regal tones with her son's life story, one hand taking over from the other as she made nostalgia notes evoke his life, lost but quietly remembered. Gina and Gunter held tightly to each other and felt the excitement of their future, their hearts rejoicing, and the passion of Lisa's playing. Miss McRae, Mr. Dimble, and Miss Floyd, Mr. Hartsey, all of them in their way shared feelings they could never express in words. Lisa wove in their words, the music becoming the tale of so many in war-torn London. She relieved her own joys and tragedies, her terrible journey to London, her passage to childhood. She mourned her parents in the tragic trolling of the bells and the Rachmaninoff prelude. From its majestic progression of chords, she built a hymn of gratitude to her parents' love, to their wise devotion, and to every mother and father who had the courage to save their child by saying goodbye. When enough tears had been shed in the audience, Lisa began the final piece, Chopin's heroic Polonaise. This was Lisa's tour de force, and its thunderous exuberance raised the spirits of all assembled, as row after row of shining eyes relieved their proudest moments, their courage under the bombing, their unshakable resolve, their ultimate victory. After many seconds of awed silence, the audience erupted in tumultuous applause. Lisa stood up and the applause grew louder. She looked into the audience and took a bow after bow before relieving the stage in the glory of the spotlight. The scene in the dressing room was utterly chaotic. The press of the people included all the hostile children, shaking Lisa's hand one by one. 10 women from the factory, Mr. Hartsey and the staff of the Jewish Refugee Agency, Miss Canfield and the 5 Quaker brethren, and of course Sonia and Rosie and Leo and Esther. Then came Maybelle Floyd, towing a well-dressed impresario who congratulated her profusely and spoke loudly to be heard above the din. "Your professor tells me you play a wonderful Grieg piano concert." Hans sat near Lisa and drank the sound of the compliments, nodding his head in delight. Next to him stood Gina and Hunter. When Miss Cohen had finished escorting the young children of the hostel through the informal receiving line, she asked them to stay a minute while she said her own congratulations. The matron watched the gracious young woman in the red gown, thanking the well-wishers, and pulled out her embroidered handkerchief. The beautiful vision was too much for her. "When did this happen? You are no longer children," she exclaimed. Lisa, Gina, and Gunter took her by the hand. "But we are," said Lisa. "We will always be the children of Wildenson Lane." At the stage door, another crush of the well-wishers stood, a handsome French Renaissance soldier wearing a discreet medal on the lapel of his uniform. He was waiting for the crowd to thin and was carrying a dozen red roses. Rosie saw him first, and guessing who he must be, brought him over to her radiant sister. Lisa couldn't believe her eyes. She had tried to forget the image of this handsome soldier. It seemed so unlikely that they would ever meet again. He put his hands over his heart as he had before to show how much he loved the music, then handed the red roses with a card that read, "With fervent admiration, Michael Gobleck." Lisa clasped his hand and brought him to the group of well-wishers, forming a tight circle around her. Through her eyes brimming with tears, she surveyed the group that meant everything in the world to her. From Gina and Gunter to Hans and Miss Cohen, to her beautiful sisters, Sonia and Rosie and Leo and Esther just behind. And now this handsome stranger who she instinctively felt would be part of her future. Then, elated by love and admiration surrounding her, she suddenly sensed an additional presence and was overwhelmed by a feeling of closeness to her mother. It was as if Malka were watching from above. Her heart filled with joy as she realized she had done it. She had fulfilled the promise she had made to her mother. She had held on to her music.